At the center of it all, a silent, unmoving figure, Xiao Zhan. He had weathered storms before, but this one was different. It wasn't a professional scandal or a brand controversy. It was something far more personal, far more painful. It was about his silence. The public was demanding a response. They wanted him to speak on the tragedy that had so deeply affected his friend, Wang Yibo, and by extension, their entire world. They wanted him to weigh in on the rumors, to defend his friend, to offer his grief, his solidarity. But he had said nothing. His silence was a physical presence, a wall that grew taller and thicker with every passing day. And in that silence, a new narrative began to take shape, a cold, calculated indifference. A betrayal. The hate was a new kind of cruelty. It wasn't the usual fan-driven vitriol. It was a deep, personal outrage. They accused him of being a fair-weather friend, of abandoning his companion in his darkest hour. They called him a coward, a traitor. The digital landscape, once a testament to his immense popularity, was now a wasteland of condemnation. His team, his family, his friends, all urged him to speak. They had a statement ready, a carefully worded piece of a prose that would deny, defend, and deflect. But he refused. He had a reason for his silence, a reason so profound, so deeply personal, that to speak it would be to expose a wound that had never truly healed. The mind-blowing scene that would break the internet didn't happen in a sterile press conference or on a carefully managed live stream. It happened in the quiet, unassuming sanctuary of a recording studio. Xiao Zhan had been there for days, a phantom figure in the quiet dark, working on a song that no one knew about. It was a song that was not meant for the public, not for his fans, not for the charts. It was a song that was meant for two people, a song that was a final, honest conversation with a friend he had lost a long time ago. The song was a raw, unfiltered outpouring of grief and regret. It was a poetic, aching melody that told a story that no one else knew. It was a story of a beautiful, tragic friendship that had been broken not by malice or betrayal, but by the relentless, cruel machinery of fame. It was a story of two friends, once inseparable, who had been pulled apart by the demands of their careers, by the whispers of rivals, and by the constant, suffocating pressure of a public that demanded a narrative, not a reality. The song was a mind-blowing, brutal confession. It was an admission of a cowardice he had carried for years, a regret that had been a silent companion in his heart. It was a lament for a friendship he had not been brave enough to fight for, a love he had not been strong enough to protect. The lyrics were a poetic, heart-wrenching apology. I watched you fade away, and I did nothing. I was a fortress of silence, a coward who was afraid to lose what I had. When the song was finally finished, he sat in the silent studio, the raw, aching melody filling the air. He had not just created a piece of music, he had performed an exorcism. He had released a truth that had been a poison in his soul for years. He knew he could not release the song. It was too personal, too raw, too honest. It was a private truth, not a public one. But the truth has a way of finding its own path. The song, a raw, unedited track, was somehow leaked. A studio intern, a fan, a ghost in the machine, no one ever knew. The song was not released with fanfare or promotion. It simply appeared, a phantom in the digital landscape. It was a mind-blowing moment. The internet, which had been a fire of condemnation, fell into a stunned, profound silence. The song's title, a simple poetic phrase, was a dagger to the heart. For why? The lyrics were not an attack or a defense. They were a raw, brutal confession. And in that raw, brutal honesty, the public found something more powerful than any denial or rebuttal. They found the truth. They found a human being, a man who had not been cold or indifferent, but who had been a quiet, grieving soul who was carrying a burden of regret so heavy it had broken him. The comment section was not filled with hate, but with a tidal wave of shared tears, of personal confessions, of a collective, shared understanding of a love that had been lost. The song had not just broken the internet, it had broken a barrier between a celebrity and a public that had been built on lies and facades. It had exposed a wound that was so deeply human, so raw and so real, that it transcended the boundaries of fame, of scandal, and of all the noise that had come before. Xiao Zhan's silence had not been an act of indifference. It had been an act of profound, silent grief. And in the end, it was a song, a final, beautiful, mind-blowing act of honesty that had not just broken the internet, but had, in a beautiful and unexpected way, healed a million hearts. The song, a raw and agonizing confession, had been an emotional exorcism for Xiao Zhan. The moment it was leaked, it broke through the digital noise and shattered the public narrative. The world, which had seen him as cold and indifferent, was now faced with a vulnerable, grieving soul. The public outpouring of emotion had been immense, a collective sigh of relief and a shared moment of understanding. But for Xiao Zhan, the real work had only just begun. The public's forgiveness was one thing, his own was another. The deepest wound was the one that festered in his heart, the unspoken, unhealed chasm between him and the one person who truly mattered, Wang Yibo. He had confessed to the world, but he had not confessed to the man he had wronged. The song was a public apology, but a true reconciliation required more than a melody and a shared digital space. It required a face-to-face meeting, a moment of profound vulnerability and forgiveness. For weeks, Xiao Zhan had wrestled with the idea. He knew that the scandal and the grief had been a crucible for Wang Yibo, a trial by fire that had forged in him a new kind of strength. He was no longer the fierce, young dancer he had once been. He was a man who had faced the storm and found his anchor. Xiao Zhan was terrified that his arrival would be a new storm, a painful reminder of a betrayal he had hoped to leave in the past. The first mind-blowing scene in their reconciliation didn't happen in a public place or on a stage. It happened on a quiet, unassuming pier in a small coastal town. Wang Yibo had retreated there, seeking refuge from the relentless demands of his life. He was there, a solitary figure, fishing in the early morning light. The only sound was the gentle lapping of the waves and the quiet hum of the fishing line. He was at peace, a man who had, finally, found his sanctuary. Xiao Zhan had found him through a mutual friend, a small, quiet act of love and loyalty. He had driven for hours, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. He walked onto the pier, and for the first time in years, he saw Wang Yibo not through the lens of a camera or a public image, but as a man, a friend he had lost a long time ago. He was older now, his face a little more tired, his eyes a little more knowing. But he was still the same man, the same quiet, unshakable soul who had been his anchor in a world of turmoil. Wang Yibo didn't turn around. He didn't have to. He knew, with an instinct that transcended words, who was standing behind him. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence was not awkward or tense. It was heavy, a physical presence, filled with the weight of shared memories, unspoken regrets, and a love that had never truly faded. Finally, Xiao Zhan spoke, his voice low and raw with emotion. "I'm sorry," he said. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken apologies. "I was a coward. I let the world come between us. I'm so sorry." Wang Yibo still didn't turn around. He just cast his line into the ocean, the motion a fluid, graceful thing. He was a man of action, a man who spoke through his art and his silence. His response was not in words, but in a small, mind-blowing gesture. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, perfectly smooth, perfectly round stone. It was the river heart, the one he had held on to, the one that was a testament to his own journey. He held it in his palm, and he extended his hand to Xiao Zhan. Xiao Zhan, his heart pounding in his chest, took the stone. He held it, feeling its smooth, cool weight in his palm. It was more than a stone. It was a symbol, a wordless gesture of forgiveness, a promise that the anchor was still there, a symbol that the river had finally flowed home. In that moment, the dam broke. Xiao Zhan, who had not cried in public for years, sobbed, the tears a raw, unfiltered outpouring of grief and relief. Wang Yibo finally turned around. He looked at Xiao Zhan, his eyes filled not with anger or resentment, but with a profound, aching love. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. He just put a hand on Xiao Zhan's shoulder, a silent, grounding touch that said everything. He had forgiven him. The song had been a beautiful confession, but this moment was a beautiful, mind-blowing act of a love, of a friendship, that had, in the end, proven to be stronger than any scandal, any sorrow, or any betrayal. The sun rose higher in the sky, a quiet, beautiful, and healing thing. The two men stood on the pier, two souls who had been separated by a world of noise and expectations, now connected by a simple, profound, and silent act of forgiveness. The reconciliation was not for the cameras, not for the headlines. It was for them, a beautiful and poignant end to a love story that had been written not in public, but in the quiet, unspoken language of a friendship that had, in the end, transcended even death. The emotional reconciliation on the pier had been a mind-blowing, heart-wrenching, and deeply necessary chapter in their story. The river heart had sealed a promise of forgiveness and a renewal of their bond. But forgiveness is not a magic wand that erases the past. It is a key that unlocks a new future. For Wang Yibo and Xiao Zhan, this new future was filled with both promise and uncertainty. They were no longer just two individuals. They were a unit, a symbol of hope and healing for a world that had watched their silent struggles. Their reunion, though private, would inevitably have a powerful impact on their public lives and, more importantly, on their collaborative artistic future. The first step was to simply exist in the same space, without the pressure of a public narrative or the weight of a shared history. After the meeting on the pier, they didn't immediately return to their hectic lives. They spent the next week in the small coastal town, in the quiet, unassuming house Wang Yibo had rented. The days were filled with a profound and healing simplicity. They talked for hours, not about the past and its painful betrayals, but about the present and the future. They talked about their dreams, their fears, and the art they wanted to create. They went for long walks on the beach, the ocean breeze a constant, soothing presence. They cooked meals together, the mundane act of preparing food a powerful, simple reminder of a friendship that was, finally, whole again. In this sanctuary, a new kind of creative energy began to stir. They had always been artists, but their art had been a product of their individual passions. Xiao Zhan's gentle, poetic soul, and Wang Yibo's fierce, powerful discipline. Now, their art became a conversation, a beautiful, mind-blowing fusion of their two worlds. It began with something simple, a small sketchpad and a pen. Wang Yibo, who had always spoken through his dance and his art, began to sketch. He sketched not just images, but feelings. He drew a sketch of the ocean, but the lines were not just waves. They were a representation of his journey, the turmoil he had faced, the stillness he had found. Xiao Zhan, who had always found his voice in song and in gentle gestures, began to write. He wrote not just lyrics, but a kind of poetic prose, a beautiful lyrical lament that was also a celebration of life, of love, of the unshakable strength of the human heart. Their conversations turned from personal healing to artistic collaboration. They realized that their individual art forms, once separate, could become something new, something powerful, something that was a testament to their shared history. They began to envision a new project, not a commercial one, not a public one, but a private, artistic one, a project that would be a culmination of their individual journeys and a celebration of their shared love. The project would be a short film, a powerful and moving piece of art that would tell a story that no words could ever convey. The film would be a mind-blowing, poetic journey. It would not have a traditional plot or dialogue. It would be a series of interconnected scenes, a visual and emotional narrative that would be a fusion of their two artistic worlds. The film would be shot in black and white, a powerful visual representation of the shades of emotion, the shades of a love that was both light and dark. The film would not be an actor's performance. It would be a live, raw, and unfiltered human experience. The film would be a quiet, powerful, and deeply emotional testament to their reconciliation, to their shared grief, and to the unshakable truth of a love that had, in the end, proven to be stronger than any storm. The film would open with a shot of the ocean, the waves crashing against the shore, a symbol of the turmoil they had faced. It would then cut to a scene of a lone figure, a silent, solitary man walking along a deserted beach, a poignant reminder of Wang Yibo's journey. The film would then cut to a scene of a man painting, his face a canvas of quiet sorrow and profound resolve, a powerful representation of Xiao Zhan's private grief. The scenes would then begin to weave together, their separate journeys converging in a beautiful, mind-blowing, and deeply emotional finale. The final scene of the film would be a powerful, mind-blowing climax. It would not be a scene of a public reunion or a grand gesture. It would be a simple, quiet, and deeply human moment. It would be a shot of two men, standing side by side, their faces turned toward the ocean, the setting sun casting a golden glow on their faces. They would not speak. They would not touch. They would simply be. And in that simple, profound, and powerful moment, the film would end, a testament to a love that had, in the end, been a triumph of the heart.